guys, it's Bex. Welcome to another video and another reading vlog. Today is a very exciting reading vlog, at least for me, hopefully for you guys, because I'm going to be reading 3 books by an author. Obviously you already know who it is because of the title and the thumbnail, but that is Stephen King. I have read 1 novel and 1 novella by Stephen King. I read The Talisman in 2022. No, I think I read it last year. Yeah, 2023, and I really liked it. I really liked the story and everything. It was my absolute favorite book, but I liked it. And then I read a little novella by him called 1922. So the 3 books I'm going to be reading in this video are Misery. I almost just said by Stephen King. Note up. 11/22/63, and I don't own this one actually because I figured I would want a audiobook of one of these books, if not possibly audioing some of like maybe 11/22/63 because it's really long. But the one I decided to do on audio is Pet Sematary, and I actually have started that book already. I wanted to get a head start because that book is it's medium sized. It's not one of his long books, but it's also like more than 400 pages, I think. And of course I will continue to listen to that while reading these books. As far as Pet Sematary goes, I guess I will tell you guys what it's about if you don't know and my thoughts on it so far. So it is a horror book. It is about this family who moves to this kind of smaller town, and the road that they live on is not even very busy, but just it's a very popular road for like big semi trucks to drive on. That's kind of an important part of the story, which is why I mention it. There is this little pet cemetery that people throughout the years have gone and buried their pets at, kind of near his house. The main character, Lewis, it's him, his wife, his son, who I think is 2, and his daughter, who is like 5 maybe, and his neighbor Judd, who lives across the street from him, kind of shows it to him. The reason kind of I mentioned the road being very busy is because unfortunately a lot of animals have been hit by the trucks, so therefore the people in this town bury their pets in the pet cemetery. So there's lots of pets there, and yeah, Judd shows Lewis the pet cemetery, and kind of the tagline of this book is sometimes dead is better. Judd has said that in the book so far, and it's also in like the summary. So as far as my thoughts on the book so far, first of all, I want to say that I have seen the movies. I think there's an older one and a newer one. I've seen both of them, and I just really enjoy Stephen King's movies. I can't really say I enjoy his books yet because I haven't read that many of them, but I really enjoy his movies. I feel like they're the perfect mix of like horror and thriller and suspense. They're not too horror, at least in the sense of like things popping out at you. I don't like that kind of horror, and his aren't really like that. But yeah, I really like the movie. I don't obviously know how I'd be feeling about the book if I hadn't seen the movie, so that's one thing to think about. But I am liking the book. I wouldn't say that it is absolutely blowing my mind. Did I say how far I am into it? If not, I'm 40% through. I think 39% through exactly. I definitely think around maybe the 40% mark is where things start building up to the climax of the story. I mean, obviously the whole book is building up to that, but you know what I mean. Like you finally get kind of to the point of what's going to happen, at least part of what's going to happen. I do think that it's maybe, at least the beginning, maybe 40% was just a tiny bit slow, tiny bit boring. You just get a lot of Lewis going over to Judd's house for beers at night, and them talking, and Lewis going to work, and just stuff like that. And I think that's kind of, not this book is a review on The Talisman, but I remember kind of thinking similar thoughts on The Talisman. Yeah, we'll see how I feel obviously further on through Pet Sematary, but it's a little bit creepy so far, but honestly not very. I think more so the concept, once you've seen the movies or read the book, you kind of know what happens, and I think it's more so the concept that's scary. Stephen King himself has said that it is the scariest book he's ever written in his opinion, and it's also not based on a true story that happened to him, but he got the idea for the book based on like a place that him and his wife stayed at and his family stayed at, and there was a pet cemetery there. I also want to say that there has been 2 other mentions of Stephen King books, stories, movies, whatever you want to call them, in this book so far. They talk about Derry, which is the town that it takes place in, and they've also talked about a rabid dog that went like mad, which is Cujo by Stephen King, if you didn't know those. So I love when authors do that, and I have heard that he does that, so I was super excited to hear that. Yeah, those are my thoughts on that. I still have about 100 pages left of the physical book that I'm reading right now, which isn't a Stephen King book. So I'm going to really try to finish that either today or tomorrow. And once I do, I think the book I'm going to read is Misery. So it is about this author, Paul Sheldon. He's a best-selling novelist, and he gets in a really bad car accident, and the person that finds him is one of his biggest fans. She basically holds him and keeps him captive because she wants him to change the ending and like rewrite one of his stories. So she holds him captive there, and I have seen the movie for this a long time ago, so I remember what happens, but I am glad that it's been so long because I don't remember everything, and I am definitely excited to watch the movie after I read this book. This book came out in 1987. Goodness. First of all, I hate when books have chapters that start randomly in the middle of a page, and that's how this one is. Second, the main character, well, one of the main characters, Annie, is very weird. Anyway, his legs are broken and he's really just not doing well. I'm literally on page 15 only, but Paul just woke up not that long ago and is just kind of, even this early on, is starting to put the pieces together that Annie is just a little weird and not right. So he already has a bad feeling, even though he doesn't know like what's going on yet, except that she saved him. So that's where I'm at so far. Hey guys, sorry for the weird angle. And also, there are a lot of people, well, there are people around me because I'm in a parking lot. But I am making my way through Misery. I'm on page 116. So far, dude, this angle is just so bad. Is that a little better? I actually think that's a little better. My thoughts on this book so far are that I'm finding it really interesting. Now looking back, I do kind of wish I would have picked books that either don't have a movie adaptation or that I haven't seen the movie adaptation, but I will say that I've seen a lot of his movies. So like I said at the beginning of this video, I have seen this movie, so I do know what happens, and it is kind of interesting because it has been a long time since I've seen it, but for some reason I remember a lot of what happens. Like I can picture the movie, I can picture like the scenes and certain things that happen, not in detail, but I do think not knowing is just better. But oh well, can't do anything about that. I made some notes on this book because I've just been trying to do that more lately and actually have things of importance to say about the book. because sometimes I think I just ramble. One thing that I wrote down was that I like how Stephen King shows you early on that Annie, you can tell that she's like not really right in the head and that she's a little bit crazy from pretty early on, but it shows it very gradually. So at first you're like, okay, you know, why hasn't this lady called the police or tried to get him to a hospital? I mean, there's a storm going on, or there was, but still. At this point in the book, it's been like a couple weeks of him being in her house, and obviously he's realized, like, why isn't this lady, you know, getting me to a hospital? She doesn't want to. So yeah, you know pretty early on that something's wrong, but he's very gradual about like showing kind of how deep that goes. And when she gets like angry, she has a temper and bad things happen. It's a pretty scary situation. The book isn't scary in the sense that you would usually think, oh, this is a scary book, but it is very suspenseful as far as when the author is like doing something he shouldn't be doing. I don't know why I keep calling him the author. Paul. When Paul is like doing something that he shouldn't do, because if she catches him, she's not gonna be happy about it. You're just on the edge of your seat, like, is she gonna catch him? I just know that it's gonna get a lot worse, and I know that it's gonna get pretty gruesome because I remember that from the movies. And even the back of the book says she has a lot of ways to spur him on. One is a needle, another is an axe, and then there's the blowtorch. Gosh, those are my thoughts on this book so far. I'm going to keep reading for a little while. It's 11. I'm probably gonna read for like 20 minutes in the car, and then I'm gonna get out and go watch my fiance play a golf tournament and hopefully win. Annie says the weirdest things that just prove that she's crazy. Like, I don't know why this proves that she's crazy, but she always uses the word cockadoodie. Anyway, I just thought I'd mention that. Hey guys, I thought I would give you the tiniest bit of an update on this book, and also because I'm gonna film myself reading, I just thought I would explain why I look like this. I'm getting ready slowly but surely for my bridal shower today. I'm so excited. I did half of my hair and I realized that I kind of was starting to get ready too early because it's 12 o'clock and I need to leave at like 1:50. So I thought I would take a little break and read a little bit. I'm on page 264. Of Misery. I don't know why this book is taking me forever to read. I think one, I've been pretty busy lately. It's funny. I'm very interested in the story, but every Stephen King book I've read so far, which is 1.5, I read them so stinking slow. Like, The Talisman took me 2 months to read. The novella, that's literally barely over 100 pages, well, I think it was like 130 pages, took me like 3 weeks to read, which is crazy for a book that short. So I don't know why but I'm kind of finding myself reading this slow too. I'm just kind of waiting to get to the final shebang of this book because I have less than 100 pages left. So I'm getting there, but I just kind of want to get there. Not that I'm not enjoying it. I am enjoying it. I don't know if that makes any sense. But anyway, page 264, let's keep reading. I need my ambiance. Keep reading ahead. Why am I doing that? No! So close! Oh, I'm scared. This book is so heavy. I made a mess. You're stuck. I have crumbs stuck in my book. What am I supposed to do, you guys? Alright, there's still like 2 in there, but I literally can't get them out. Oh, stupid commercial. Sorry. Okay, now I'm just grumpy. Don't do that over your book. Learned my lesson. Sorry, I just made a weird face because our main character, Jake, is in this town, Derry. If you know Derry, it's from It and a lot of his books, but he's trying to find someone there in the past. He's in the past, and he's looking in the phone book, and there's like a whole page of Dunnings is the last name of the guy he's looking for, and he doesn't know his first name. And anyway, he's saying how that's not very surprising, especially in small towns, and he's saying, in my last 5 years teaching English at LHS, I must have had 24 starbirds and lemke's. Some of them siblings, most of them first, second, or third cousins. They intermarried and made more. So yeah, that's why I did that face. Also, this book in present day is in like 2000 and something. I think it's like 2012 or 15 or something like that. This book was written in 2012, so I'm pretty sure it takes place in 2012. So like, what? This guy's a teacher in 2012 and is saying that this happens in his town that he lives in. That's gross. Anyway. Am I making this up, or is George Denbrough the Georgie from It? They're talking about how George Denbrough, a little boy, had lost his arm and his life at the sewer drain by this like clown, or they thought a guy dressed in a clown suit or whatever. So is that the same George? I don't remember his last name. I think so. I know for you it's been 1 second, but for me it's been like 2 weeks since I've updated this video. Maybe not quite that long, but I am very slowly making my way through this huge book. I am a little bit over halfway through. My Kindle says I'm 53% of the way through. Also an update, I did finish Pet Sematary. I know that book is kind of like, I haven't showed myself reading it or anything in this video because I was listening to it on audio, but I pretty much only listen to my audiobooks when I'm in the car, so therefore I just haven't filmed myself at all or really given updates on that book, so I'm sorry. I think I'm gonna hold off a little bit longer and make you guys wait to the end of this video just where I talk about all of them, but I did finish it and I really liked it. So the update on 11/22/63. First of all, I mentioned on my Kindle, I actually am so excited because I just yesterday got the notification from Libby that this book became available to borrow from the library. So I immediately got it on my Kindle because that is what I was trying to do, because I just read faster on my Kindle like most people, and this book is just so big that it's hard to hold and be comfortable and all that. So since yesterday I've been reading it on my Kindle. My thoughts on this book right now, where I'm at, I think it's about to kind of change and go into the next section of the book. If I'm not mistaken, it says there's like a glossary at the beginning. Part 5 is on page 575 and I'm on page 459, so I still have a little bit over 100 pages until I'm to that part, but that part is called 11/22/63. Basically, the first half and more of the book is leading up to that date and that year. Our main character Jake is in the past still, but the past takes him, or like the time wormhole thingy takes him to, I think, is it 1958? I could be wrong, something like that. So he has to live in the past for about 5 years before he can get to the date that JFK was slain. He's just been living in the past and just living his life with a couple little missions to accomplish, I guess is a word for it, to change the past in other forms and with other people. So the last like 200 pages, I would say, maybe even more, have been him, Jake, living in this little town of Jody, Texas, which is kind of what the back says. It says, finding himself in warm-hearted Jody, Texas, Jake begins a new life. So yeah, he literally does. He begins a new life, you know, lying about where he's from, his name, all that, and he like gets a job and he's just literally living his life, you know, like it's 2011, but it's 1960 or whatever it is. Although I like the story and what has been going on for the last 200 pages. Like, it hasn't been boring per se, but I feel like it's kind of just a side plot, and I find myself just kind of waiting and wanting to get to the main plot of the JFK assassination, trying to save him and blah blah blah. Obviously, Stephen King put that 300 pages in there for a reason. I guess probably to just get you more connected to Jake and, you know, introduce a bigger cast of characters and whatnot. I'm just kind of like, oh, I kind of wish he would have made this part shorter. I feel like I'm just rambling. But basically, I'm really liking the book. I like all of his books. Like, he's such a good storyteller. I feel like the most mundane things that he writes about, I would be so bored if it was any other writer, but just because of how talented he is and how I feel like he just uses very simple sentences, simple wording, not in the sense of like he's not smart, obviously he is, but I don't know if that makes any sense. So like, it's easy to read, but it's also kind of slow, and I definitely think that's a theme in his books, for me at least, and lots of mundane things happening. But like I said, it's not like I'm bored reading about those mundane things. I'm really excited to see what happens, honestly, like very curious. That's my update. Sorry it's been so long, even though not for you guys. I will update you more, maybe when I'm done, maybe when I'm farther in, I don't know. I have like, how many pages? I'm on page 832 and 10 technically the last page is 850, so 20 pages left. Stephen King says, I originally tried to write this book way back in 1972. I dropped the project because the research it would involve seemed far too daunting for a man who was teaching full-time. Wow, yeah, he did so much research in order to write this book. Like, in the book, Jake lives in the apartment downstairs from Lee Harvey Oswald for a little while to, like, get info on him, you know? And Stephen King toured that exact apartment, the one downstairs, in order to get info. And he paid $20 for the privilege to tour it. Done. The book in total says it's 866 pages. Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix is 870 pages. So even though this book technically, not including the afterword because that's not really part of the book, ends on page 842, still very close to the longest book I've ever read. And I can tell. Okay guys, as you just saw, I just finished this book and it's literally 5 minutes later. So I haven't really had that much time to fully think about my thoughts on the book. But then again, I've been reading it very slowly over a couple weeks. So I feel like I don't really need that much time to form my thoughts and opinions on it. So I just figured I would finish this video because it's been a while, and just do my outro. We'll go in order. So I read Misery. Did I tell you guys my thoughts on this book already? If I haven't, these are my thoughts. So my rating on this book is a 3.75 stars. I liked it, but it's definitely not my favorite Stephen King book. I don't know why, because it's short, but something about it just seemed slow, even though it's short. But I still liked it. I thought it was really interesting the way that Stephen King kind of portrays, what's her name? I literally forgot her name because it's been a while. Annie. How he portrays Annie and the fact that she's kind of not right in the head, and how our main character, Paul, the author, really has to rely on her even though she's like holding him captive. He still has to try to stay on her good side, kind of, because obviously he knows that if he says the wrong thing or does the wrong thing, she could snap at any moment and things would not be pretty. Some of this book is pretty gruesome, I will say. That was definitely different for me because I think technically this is the first horror novel that I've ever read, because I finished this before I finished Pet Sematary, which then brings me to my thoughts on Pet Sematary. I listened to it on audiobook through my library, and I was really excited to read this book because I think it's one of my favorite Stephen King stories and movies, and I've just heard amazing things about this book. And I have to say that I really agree because I really liked it. My rating for this book was a 4.5 stars, which is definitely my highest rated Stephen King book so far. And this story is just so wild, like what the family and the characters go through and the decisions that they make. I just really wish I could explain it, but that's spoilers. I feel like this book specifically, I just don't want to give spoilers away for any book, but I think it's really important for this book, and you can kind of guess what sort of maybe happens based on reading the summary and whatever. I'm not going to go too much into it because I just don't want to give anything away on accident. But yeah, amazing story. I think this book was a really good length. I think it's like 500 something pages, so maybe a little bit long, but for what is in the book, I think it suits the story really well. And that if it was much shorter, it would have been too short and not explained enough and not given you as much backstory on the characters and all of that. So I guess that's kind of all I have to say about that book. I really liked it. And then of course I just finished this tome, 11/22/63. I was also really excited to read this one. I mean, all of these books I was excited to read, but I think this one almost the most, probably out of all of these because I haven't seen the correlating, I think it's a mini-series possibly, on this book that stars James Franco. So I'm really excited to watch that. I don't know if it's available on any of the streaming services I have, but hopefully. Again, this story, he is just a genius. This story is so crazy how he thought to write this book. Granted, he obviously lived through, maybe not obviously, but he's older. I think he's, gosh, I remember looking it up. I think he was born in like the 50s, so 11/22/63. He lived through the JFK assassination. I also really like how Stephen King has our main character Jake go back in time, and it isn't just solely based on the JFK assassination. I think I'm kind of being a hypocrite or making no sense, because I feel like earlier in this video I talked about how the middle section of the book and just how he was living in Jody, Texas and all that, I was kind of like, okay, let's move on to the JFK part. But crazily enough, crazily, is that a word? Crazy enough? I kind of was most uninterested, or at least interested in that part, like the last, not the actual JFK assassination part, but kind of leading up to it and his research on Lee Harvey Oswald. I don't know. I don't think I'm making sense. I don't know what I'm thinking in my brain right now, but basically my overall thoughts are that I think the book was a little bit too long. I do. I think maybe if it was like 650 pages, that would have been like perfect, and I don't think it would have taken away from the book or the story or getting to know the characters. I was very intrigued to see what happened at the end, because I kind of thought I knew what was going to happen and then it didn't, so that was surprising. Honestly, I'm kind of glad the way it ended. I'm glad I was wrong. So yeah, this video was very interesting to film. I would say, also, hold on. My rating on 11/22/63. I think I'm gonna go with definitely the 4 stars. I'm gonna say a 4.25 because of what I have already said about how so long, it took me so long to read, blah, blah, blah. The story itself, amazing, 5 stars, but it wasn't perfect, so I'm gonna say 4.25-ish. That could change. But am I the biggest Stephen King fan ever? No, but I definitely appreciate his work, his writing, how he has influenced so many other authors. It's crazy that we live in a world where Stephen King is still alive and writing books. That's awesome. I feel like a lot of the kind of classic authors that everyone knows and loves are from the past and gone. So even though he's getting old, he still writes books. So I'm definitely excited to continue to pick up books from him. I have one more that I own that I haven't read yet, and that is It, which of course is perfect for the fall. So who knows, maybe we'll read that soon. But I do think I need a little bit of a break. That book is over 1,000 pages. So we'll see when I read that. But he writes, so many different genres. This book was like magical realism, time travel. There were some thrillery aspects to it. I guess fantasy, because I think magical realism is like a subgenre of fantasy. He's obviously written a lot of other fantasy books. Horror, he has huge books, regular sized books, novellas. He has so many books. So I definitely think you can find something out there for you that you will like and that you should try him out. So I think that is the end of this video. I really hope that you guys liked it. I'm sorry that it took me so long, even though you guys probably don't even care or know because of the internet. But thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!